Hello everyone, James Donaldson here with The Contemporary Gentleman, and I want you to consider something for a minute. Guns are like an insurance policy. You don't always need it, but when you need it, and you're glad you have it. So for that matter, I want you to think of extended magazines as just a way of expanding your coverage. And with that, I want you to picture a scenario. You've just been woken up from a deep sleep in the middle of the night by an enormous crash down the hall. Then you hear what sounds like footsteps. You get your self-defense pistol, you're still groggy, you go out into the hallway, you present your weapon, shine the light. A person in a ski mask with a crowbar begins running toward you. So, you fire. That is a lot of variables and a very intense scenario. One of the biggest variables is adrenaline pumping through. The more training, the better you can compensate. But nonetheless, adrenaline is an enormous factor. A lot of people lose fine motor skills during adrenaline. And of course, don't forget the fact that you're also groggy, not thinking clearly, and you're reacting. How many rounds did you just fire? Even those of you who are imagining it, could you tell me how many rounds you imagine firing? Tonight, or today, this morning, whenever you're watching this video, I'm going to be talking about high-capacity magazines and why I need one, perhaps. Or at least why I should be able to decide if I need one or not. Now I'm going to be omitting talking about hunting and competition because there's basically different rules depending on animals for hunting and types of competition for competition. So I'm going to be speaking mainly about defense, including defense against some animals. So, if you want to go ahead and see all my arguments as to why I should be allowed to decide how many rounds I need to defend myself and my family, stay tuned. Diving right into the meat and potatoes, why is this even a law? Well, let me explain that to you. The people who created the law that at one point existed and luckily went away and now they're trying to bring back, they think that they can limit a mass shooter and make them have to reload, and that way someone might have time to tackle them or do something of that nature. There's a really great video on YouTube that was done by a sheriff's office to demonstrate how someone proficient at a weapon, this isn't really a big deal. So I took this a step further with a video you're about to see where I discuss the fact that someone who's proficient with a weapon, such as myself, a gun enthusiast, or a police officer, or people who aren't so great, mass shooters, gangsters, people like that, most of us are pretty proficient with a weapon. When it comes to reloading, you can be very fast. Other people are not as proficient. These people are usually people that kind of have a gun for defense. Now what I want to make very clear is I'm not knocking anybody that has a gun for defense that doesn't practice with it a lot. It's very easy for me to make time to practice with it because it's a hobby. I enjoy doing it. For others where it's a little more of a necessity or they at least have the gun, I think it's great that they have a weapon for self-defense. I think it's good for them to train on it, but I think having it at all, as long as they have some familiarity with it, is preferable. But they probably don't practice reloads a lot. So, video you're going to watch, you're going to see a difference between someone like myself with some degree of familiarity with a weapon. You're going to see me racing other people who have a lot less familiarity with a weapon to see the difference in magazine reloads. Let's take a look.
Go! What the fuck? Okay. Don't do that. Go. Oh. Go. Go!
Ooh.
Oh! Go!
Alright, so what you've seen there is all limiting magazine capacity does is probably hurt someone that is going to defend themselves with a weapon in the first place against somebody who probably isn't following the laws also in the first place. So, something else I want to hit on. 10 rounds. Someone might ask, well, why 10 rounds? That's a good question. There is no statistical data of any kind that shows why 10 rounds is the magic number. There's no real recommendations from any kind of experts in the field, mainly because they all understand that any kind of limiting by the government or anyone else is pretty asinine. Especially when the people in the government that are limiting people have armed security that probably have magazines that hold more than 10 rounds. So I'll just let that sink in. So now let's talk about excitement, as in adrenaline, shooting scenario like the scenario in the beginning. So someone like that, they're going to fire a lot of rounds. They're not really going to know where they're at as far as round count. So, kind of like Lucas Botkin with TRX Arms says, guns are like fire extinguishers. When you don't need one, especially if you're carrying one around, you kind of want something smaller and easier to cart about. But when you have to use one, you kind of want the biggest one available. In fact, if there's a fire, I would love to have a fire truck. So, while I'm getting a little hyperbolic there, my point is that when you have it, or excuse me, when you need it, you need it. You want to have no limitation to what you're doing. I will also go ahead and include that as far as animals, so I have a 10mm pistol right here. I can kill bears with this gun because 10mm is a very high power round. I can also kill deer with it. Point is that I can also shoot mountain lions, etc. So Colorado, place I go, has a magazine limitation. So instead of these 15 rounds, I have to have 5. So similar to our home defense scenario, I am shooting at a mountain lion or maybe a bear that's charging my family and I, presuming we've done nothing wrong. I am not one to mess with wildlife, so I wouldn't be doing anything wrong, I promise. Nonetheless, we're getting charged. I have to discharge. I'm going to tell you right now, if I have a bear charging me, and I'm pretty sure if anyone, including these lawmakers, have a bear charging at them, they would like to have 15 rounds instead of 10 in their magazine. If anyone feels differently, then I'm all ears. I will go ahead and address, because I know some people are going to say things like, well, if you were a good shot, or maybe if you practiced, or maybe this or maybe that. That's not really the point. The point is about having an edge. Having what you would call a force multiplier. Force multiplier is when you can multiply a force. So, I am a defensive force with my pistol at the end of my hallway fending off an intruder. I can multiply the force at which I can defend myself by having more rounds available. So, 17 round magazine, here's a 33 round magazine. Force multiplier. We'll get into military here in just a moment. So, force multiplier. You always want to have an edge. Again, the fire extinguisher thing. Someone says, well, why don't you aim better? Who cares as far as what your opinions are? You just don't understand how adrenaline and other things kick in. Now, when I say who cares, I'm not discounting training. Ideally, everyone could train to a very good level of proficiency. Some are just going to do it more than others. I'm going to train more than others. Some people are going to train more than me. The point is that wherever level you're at, if you can enhance it a little bit more to increase your likelihood of being able to successfully defend yourself, why should someone strip that away? Now, someone might also say, or think, that this is a relatively new concept. For instance, Glock 40 came out within the last 5-10 years, 15 rounds, etc. Well, there's actually a number of rounds, or a number of guns that came out a long time ago. Now, I don't have all the details on the musket arrow ones, but there actually were some that were. But I'm going to go ahead and start in 1905. The Remington auto-loading rifle came out, semi-automatic. So a version of that, the next version of that, the Model 8, came out in 1911. It held 15 rounds. Then the Remington Model 81 also held 15 rounds, came out in 1936. Then you have the M1 carbine. Came out in 1942, served in World War II, 30-round magazine. Now, the appearance of this gun, if you took away a 30-round magazine, would look like what a lot of non-gun people would say, oh, that's just a hunting rifle, mainly because it has wood grain stock and forend. Well, it's actually a weapon that helped win World War II. It's also 30 caliber. So, in contrast, this AR configuration weapon, which uses a 30-round magazine, this shoots bullets that are the size of 22 bullets. Just got a little more powder, a little more zip. The M1, which comes with a 30-round magazine that came out to help win World War II, it's 30 cal, so a lot bigger bullet. So if you're comparing the two, 30 rounds of one versus the other, I would definitely rather have the M1. Now, moving on, handguns. Browning came out with the GP35, also known as the High Power, in 1935, and that held 13 rounds. Then you have the Smith & Wesson Model 59, which came out in 1971, 14-round standard magazine, 20-round optional magazine. Then you have the Glock 17, which came out in 1982 and served in the Austrian Army, and then 1988 came to the American market. This is the 17L, not the 17. Same lower configuration, 17 rounds. It just so happens to be that they both have the number 17, Glock 17, 17 round. This actually isn't called the 17 because it holds 17 rounds. Fun fact, delicious. So, where am I getting with this is that high capacity magazines are not new. Mainly go back to the force multiplier. Next, guns are tools. I'm actually going to do an entire video on how guns are basically just tools, as well as ammo, tools, etc., etc. But let's talk about what guns are really for. For the most part, aside from competition, which is basically a competition to see who is the best at practicing to kill something, guns are for killing. Inherently that sounds bad, but let's actually break down and think about a lot of what guns kill. Guns kill terrorists, guns kill murderers, intruders, guns kill people who want to kill cops, guns kill rapists and child molesters, guns kill animals, whether it's putting food on the table or protecting ourselves because we were on a hike and unfortunately we had to run with an animal. Guns are for killing. Now, in defensive scenarios, I would say everyone's life matters. A life is a life. So whether it's a police officer defending their own life or defending someone else's life against harm, or a person defending their own life or their family's life, why can't a civilian be as well equipped to defend themselves and be efficient as a police officer or a soldier, etc.? Spoiler alert, there's no reason. Again, a life is a life. So if a police officer can have 30 rounds, or myself, when I went overseas, I could have 30 rounds per magazine to defend myself and my battle buddies, as they're called. And then of course you have guns with 100-round capacities because they have linked ammo, all that kind of thing. When we're going on a mission, we can call close air support. We have all kinds of things at our fingertips, not the least of which is a 30-round magazine. So now when I come home, I ask you, why can't I defend my family with a 30-round magazine? And I do want to get off topic a little bit and say that you don't need extra training to use a magazine that holds more rounds. You don't. Training the magazine doesn't take extra training. AR style configuration, don't think that because I've been in war with a weapon that I'm more qualified necessarily than somebody else. What makes you proficient with a weapon is practice. There are people outside the military that have never served that are by far more proficient and qualified to use an AR than people that have been in the military, even in combat. And then of course there's the other way around. You take two people in the military, one's going to be more proficient than the other. The point being that a gun is a gun. Go back and look at my gun safety video. So, where do you go from here? Well, phone versus a gun. If you can call the cops with a minute to respond to a threat, or if you can use a gun for the threat that requires a gun, which are you going to want? Now if you have a gun, are you going to prefer one that has an arbitrary 10-round magazine, Or do you want one that holds more? Because with the adrenaline, you're not going to know, as I said before, how many you've left. And who knows, you might even fire them all. So a real breakdown is when my wife is defending her and my daughter because I'm out of town, possibly doing army stuff or for work, and she has to defend herself and my child. I want her to have all the rounds at her disposal. But the government thinks that she doesn't need that. Now, even myself, where I'm more proficient with a pistol or weapon in general than my wife, I want all the rounds available. Why can't I have them? Police can. Military can. The security for the lawmakers, as I said, they all have them. But yet you and I cannot. I would like a genuine answer to this question. Now I'll kind of bring it to a close here and say that tools are for killing, as I said, and all we have to do is make laws where we say murder is illegal. And someone may say, well, that is the law. James? I'd say, oh, you're right. So you're saying criminals don't follow laws. And they would say, yes, that's what make them criminals. To which I'd reply, then why are we making laws about how many rounds you can have in a weapon? I know I may seem kind of facetious with some of this, and I am kind of playing at it because I think the logic is mind-blowingly off. But I really would like genuine responses from people that want to answer these questions. Now, nothing to do here but to go ahead and bring it to a close. This is really important to me, so I'm savoring my words. I'm trying to be very concise. I hope I've presented to you with enough information, a way for you to draw your own conclusion on high-capacity magazines. Now, I will say, if that conclusion still has you committed to thinking that 10 or whatever number you have in your head is the number that it should be, and I shouldn't be allowed to use high-capacity magazines, I genuinely want to see your response in the comments below. Now, I do urge people on both sides of the debate, I'm going to hold myself to this. No matter what, even if someone else breaks what I'm about to say, I want everyone to stick to not saying anything offensive. I want everyone to keep a cool head and keep emotion out of it. I want everyone to remain professional. Professional, I personally define it as response with a lack of emotion. So, I would love to see comments and thoughts from people that still don't like the concept of high-capacity magazines. And other people are free to chime in, as will I. So, I think that wraps it up. This is James Donaldson with the Contemporary Gentleman. And until next time, keep your composure.